Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. So, welcome everyone to Love, Sex, and Leadership. I am excited today to have a friend and colleague and a beautiful inspiration who I've known for several years now. Who's a bit known as the Dark Wizard. He brings a lot of heart, actually. My experience of Dane in real person. I think my experience of Dane Tomas before knowing Dane Tomas was a lot of judgments and projections and thoughts. Then actually, when I met him, we geeked out on some DeMartini stuff, and we had a beautiful connection. And we've known each other now for a while. And I just have an appreciation for how I observe you carrying yourself in the world and not giving a fuck, and also being able to be connected to the magic and spirit realms, as well as like a really strong, know how to get shit done business guy. So I really appreciate you, brother. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate that intro. Hi, everybody.
So let's dive in a little. I mean, a little for people that don't know you. You had a spiral thing that you created a while ago that you kind of had identity around for a long time, but then that, you kind of let go of that a little while ago. Just in a short synopsis, maybe a little essence of what that was, as well as from the side of your leadership, like why, after creating something so powerful and so good, did you really feel the call to leave something behind? I think that's a question that comes up in the show sometimes around leadership. It's like, when do we know when we've created something, when to let it go and when to actually keep letting it birth?
Beautiful. Yeah, for me, I guess my overarching journey has been a long journey that combines things like sort of a self-actualization journey with sort of spiritual growth. I'm deeply into the occult and magic, but all if you put it all together, it's kind of like personal development, soul initiation, and various approaches to spiritual awakening and whatnot. And so the spiral was, I built something called the Spiral School of Awakening, and the spiral was a system for clearing emotional baggage and blocks and conditioning. And the process is something that raises your level of consciousness. So it's an ascent journey up through the chakras that is kind of clearing out baggage and gradually raising your level of consciousness. And, it was proven and demonstrably helped a lot of people be more effective in the world, more connected to a higher purpose, etc. And that was, I assembled it from finding tools that I needed to kind of liberate myself from certain blocks. That's so the first part of the journey was cleaning up a bit of my own stuff and then finding like, oh shit, I've found some things that I think really work, and kind of assembling those into a modality that I thought could help others. And then, as you would know, and other people who were leading various things would know, the second journey is like, cool, now as someone who teaches others and transmits this to others, there's a whole nother personal development journey of leadership, which was it's like I went through the spiral personally, but then I went through the spiral of building the spiral, and so the whole thing was based on spiral dynamics, which is a very useful developmental map that I recommend anyone dealing with, personal development, spiritual development should at least have a basic familiarity with. And the irony of it was, as I go through this thing and I'm building this thing, and it's gone from me teaching 10 kind of friends how to do it to like, okay, now I have, I think we taught over 500 practitioners by the kind of life cycle of the journey. And it's like, fuck, I'm now the leader of this thing. There's a community, there's a modality, there's legal aspects, there's a business aspect. This is kind of my life, right? And I would say that it was a very primary part of my purpose for about 8 to 9 years. And, I started to reach a point where there was a lot of the new issues that had to be dealt with were not issues of innovating and creating technologies, which is that's where I thrive, is like creating new systems and transmitting that. It was more moving towards like, okay, if I want to do another 10 years of this is going to be more of a leadership journey of building an organization that is mature enough to handle the shit that an organization with 500 people or 1,000 people in it has to deal with, which as I began to ascend that journey, it definitely helped me grow up in a lot of ways. Going from like, I'm a fucking rule breaker, man, to like, they're doing what? Oh, now I have to make rules? I don't really make rules. I break rules. And it's like, well, we kind of need some rules because there's 100 people and 5 of them are doing this shit in ways that are not good for the brand. So suddenly I find myself kind of having to evolve a whole nother level of like, okay, if you break this rule, we have to retrain you. And if you break it 3 times, you'll have to be out of the community. And, really stuff that I never thought of. And so basically, I feel like I got to the top of that journey for myself. And I started getting a vision that, like, well, if this thing was really positioned to where it wants to go in the world, it probably would be better with a woman or maybe a community of diverse women at the helm. Or, like, am I really the best guy? Like, as I did the work on myself and became more shamelessly expressed, and I'm, gradually acquiring like face tattoos and gold teeth and expressing I'm really into like dark magic and shit. And then you've got like Reiki healers and kinesiologists who are like, this is the guy that made our modality. Like, am I the best person to lead this brand? Because I, on the one hand, am a living example of what happens if you do this work on yourself, but I'm not a great visual representation of what you might want to, if you're a kind of, and I'm not saying everyone who does the spiral now is this, but, if you're more of a light healer sort of archetype, and then you've got someone coming to do the thing, and who's the guy? This guy. And I'm on some podcast saying some crazy shit, or I've just put out a rap single about how goddess chicks are all crazy or whatever, and it's like, there was just starting to be multiple clashes between my personal expression journey and what was probably the best for this modality, which, is still alive. My good friend Kylie Ryan bought and integrated the work into her school and holds the Spiral School now, and it's still going strong. And it was just clear to me that my growth and its growth would be supported by not being fused together, and that I'm kind of, and also there were certain archetypal dynamics that I see that are, if you're the cis white hetero male sitting on the chair of creator in a certain thing, there's a certain archetypal set of power dynamics that you're going to have to burn through over and over and over. And I'm like, I don't really want to fucking do that. Like, I don't want to have to be the projection of this, even though some of it's true. The quickest way for me out of this is like, I just get off the chair. Like, if I'm not the guy, oof. And it came to me through meditation. I was like, oh my God, I mean, could I really just like not be the guy? And it was like, that's crazy. And then it was like, that's honestly the most thrilling next step, is like, let it go. Like, this thing, it's alive. It's no longer a toddler. It more feels like a teenager or a 20-year-old. It's going to probably survive, and I am locked into a parent dynamic that probably is not the best for me, and it's probably not the best for it. And eventually, it took a long time to really own that internally. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to let it go. And I was like, fuck, that's crazy. And then people wanted to buy it, and some of them were not a good fit, and some of them kind of looked like a better fit. And that was a beautiful completion journey for me that opened up, okay, what's the next chapter? I thought I might be that guy for 40 years. And it's like, well, turns out like 9 or 10 was enough. Now what do we want to do,
No, I love that share. And for you, when you did let it go, like, what was the feeling in your body? What was the feeling that arose inside of you, and releasing something that you had birthed and created and knew inside that it was time to let it go? Like, intellectually you could feel that, and then what was the sensation that arose in your body through that?
I'd say once the fears were moved through, spaciousness. There was a couple of weeks before making an announcement that was like, I have this idea. And I'm like, can I really do that? And I did a lot of days in like dark meditation, yin yoga, close my curtains, sit in the dark, and just, I knew I couldn't solve it from a mental level. And I just kept surrendering. And that was a lot of layers of like, what are people going to think? What if it fails? What if it this, And then once that was moved through, it was just like, oh, I'm free, And it's a bit like when you move through a breakup, and at first it's the worst thing ever. And then it's like, this is right. You get to that place of like, oh, I love you more now that I'm not chained to you. Like, fuck, I've got gratitude, versus like, what the fuck? Get out, I'm stuck.
Yeah, I think it's a struggle. A lot of people go through, and I appreciate in hearing what you're sharing the place of knowing when your time was for completion and actually opening into the spaciousness of what was present. It really indicates a level of soul awareness in that, something that I know both of us have a deeper longing on this planet to see, less of the ego-driven personality trying to claim and own and have such a place of ownership of these things and actually allow things to be set free.
Yeah.
And and I guess in that, like when you're as an entrepreneur for many years and creating and bringing things out, like where's the line for you when you know that maybe someone's taken something from you or taken an idea or and made it their own? Like I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this.
I've gone through a few rounds of that, and I've gone through various eras of what I thought was the correct way to respond, and like, one of them was a little more capitalist. It's like, we're going to fucking lawyer up and get, okay, right. You're going to see from my lawyer that I'm paying $4,000 to write me a letter. You're going to really, and then realizing like that person never really did anything that interesting with it. And, if they had wanted to, those letters weren't really doing that much. And also, I had it with the spiral particularly, I had about 3 of those, and I was initially very upset and angry and self-righteous. And then there was one who was a woman who had trained with me, who I think, she was just probably got sick of me waiting for me to like hatch the modality into a licensable fashion. So she just fucked off and did her own version. And like, her website had these metaphors that I'd given in a talk that she'd recorded. I'd used this bathtub metaphor to explain systems and money and whatever. And so it was like the bathtub metaphor. I'm like, hang on a fucking minute. And, it went from like the spiral with the 22 unique emotions to like the compass with the 24 unique emotions. And I'm like, okay. But I was starting to get, I guess what I was learning by that time was like my magic and where I'm strong in this realm is innovation and creativity. And if I let too much of my consciousness go into a defense game, which I'm not saying is wrong, but for me, if I get too much into like, yeah, we're going to fucking this and that, and we'll stop you and we'll blah, it's like that's a lot of energy and attention actually. And what I decided to do with her, I think we might have sent one letter, but it was more of, I knew it was a token gesture because I was like, cool, send a fucking letter. And then that's it. I don't care what she does. And then I just went into like, I'm going to write the book. I'm going to shoot the video training. I'm going to now like put this thing out into the world for free, and really just my weapon was like, cool, I'm going to ramp up what I give and serve by like 1,000x, and like it was almost like a spite driven service. It's like, I'm going to give the world way more than you can give the world. And maybe in doing, because I can feel there's this contradictory, like on the one level, look, if she helps 100 people, maybe that's good. And on the other level, like, fuck you, bitch, you stole my thing. But also like a learning of like, it's kind of hard to make stuff in the world. And actually, as I went down that path more, it's like, having the idea is like really only a small part of what it takes. And if you can go rock this idea better than I can rock this idea, you're probably going to still have to earn the fruit of what you do. Like you're not like, oh, I copied Dane's idea and now I'm like a billionaire. It's like the step between A and B. There's a lot of legit stuff you're going to have to be able to do to make, and you're going to have to serve people and build things and lead, and you can't steal that part. Like that part's, in my opinion, the really hard bit. And also, I was consuming a lot of like very innovation, creativity, entrepreneur driven content around that time. And a lot of principles I was really into were like, your job as an innovator is to make yourself obsolete like every 3 to 6 months. Like I used to be the guy who teaches the thing in a room, but if I make a free video training, well, now everyone can learn it in like a couple of hours. I don't need to be in that room. So what am I going to do? Well, now I'm going to train the teachers. But what if the teachers can do it? I don't take anyone through it anymore because they're all, and it was like, yeah, if I just keep making myself obsolete, this thing is going to really grow. And, we didn't get anywhere near, but especially in those early days, I was like, I want to impact 1 billion people. Like I was one of those kids, you know? And it's like, well, if I work every day, all day per year, 5 or 10 at a time, that's still only a few thousand people. So if you want to even go close to that, like even vaguely in that direction, we need to level up out of this thinking of like, it's yours, it's mine, I've got to do it all myself. And so I think I just kind of, I've more been interested in throwing myself into the value creation journey. And it doesn't mean like if the new thing I'm building is the School of Magic and it's got a certain set of ideas and principles that I'm really think combining them is unique to me. Like if someone copied it exactly and I see the thing, yeah, they're going to probably get a letter and I'll probably do a bit of token normal world business shit, but that's like 1% of my energy that I'm prepared to put into that war. Like I'm more interested in like doing rituals, making cool shit, landing temples, becoming who I want to become is my primary life journey. And I don't want to spend too much time getting in little beefs and dramas. And also, I guess when I was having those experiences, I was more fresh. I kind of feel like I'm a bit more of almost an elder in some of my kind of spiritual business communities that I'm in. I've mediated multiple things where a person kind of hatched an idea that is a lot like my friend's idea that they did 2 years before you. And I'm like, look, before you just fucking sue them, let me just email them, like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Did you know the thing you're making is really similar to something such and such pioneered 2 years ago? And just letting you know, if you're not fully attached to that name, there might be still room to do a little pivot. And, and a few times I've been like, you know what? I wondered if I'd got it from somewhere. Maybe I'll call it this. And I'm like, great name. Awesome for you. And it's like, okay, we just avoided huge waste of time and energy and people hating each other. And it's like, I don't know, like the thing that is called the School of Magic, my initial blueprint was like, it's going to be called the Field. And, I'm friends with Rachel Rickers and I'm like, Rachel's going to like that, and I'm messaging with her. She's like, really? I'm like, I don't know, Dark Field. She's like, that's better. And I'm like, okay, well, like, and then it's kind of spat into its next incarnation. I'm like, it's the School of Magic. That's what it really is. But it's like, just to argue the other side, there's a lot of ideas and language that we all use that we're relating to a lot of the similar stuff. And it's not always like plagiarism and, whatever. And sometimes it is. And I don't know. It's down to you how much time and energy you spend on that shit, I think,
Yeah, for sure. And, it sparks a couple things in my awareness. I've had the realization a few times of, in a moment of inspiration, this great idea comes through and you write it all down. And then for whatever, life happens. And then you realize like, a couple of years goes by and then you actually see what it was that came through in other forms. And I've had that happen enough times where I feel like there's a level of our like quantum field awareness that's tapping into these, and then it comes through and it's really just the question of who actuates this into reality. So it's really, it's all spirits at the end of the day anyways.
I think there's a lot of that. And, I read a lot about the early kind of computer innovators and stuff. And there was like, at a certain point, there was like 3 or 4 people completely independently trying to land roughly the same thing, and it was usually the one who had the proximity to like networks and resources, worked at a university, had a couple, who was able to like flesh it out better and get a patent quicker, and some other guy who was equally genius but worked in his mum's basement but technically had the idea like 6 months earlier, but they didn't know about each other. And it's like, fuck, that thing wanted to exist, and people, we're just tapping on the channel. And I think I also feel that's a reality as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the question I have in that as well, to someone who's a creator as well and writing and a lot of things coming through, when you're in a moment, maybe you're in your solo retreat space and you really want like creativity to come through, but you're just like, there's nothing there. What are some of the go-to things that you do to empty yourself out to allow creativity to pour through?
I got a few of those, and they kind of work together, I guess. Journaling is one of my most basic practical go-tos, which I do almost every day and have done for probably 10 years now, and it's not necessarily high quality journaling. Sometimes I'm there going, I'm bored and my foot hurts and I wish this coffee would hurry up, and other times it's like, this is amazing, but it's like the commitment is just to have the motor running and have my fluidity of ideas or process stale stuff. And I think that really helps. I I write music and make beats and that kind of stuff as well. And sometimes if business ideas are stuck, I'll go write songs, and like sometimes they're good and sometimes they suck. But there's something around switching modalities that is like, oh yeah, if I just create that container like this and call it this and tell the designer it's this color, I'm like, what? Where'd that come from? It's like, well, I spent 4 hours writing a bass line and figuring out something completely different. And it can sometimes just seem to like loosen up my brain, like I think sometimes pushing is just really not the way. And also working out, meditation, self-pleasure and sex magic is big for me. And it's almost like, it's not that any one is the right one. It's just whatever tools I've got to get the channel open, I'm into. And sometimes the gym is more used than self-pleasure, and sometimes meditation is more used than the gym. And sometimes forgetting about it all and going for a swim is good. And I don't really sweat. It's funny. I feel like as an entrepreneur and like spiritual creator, I'm mature. And as a musician, I'm younger. So I can compare the two of like when my music guy is like, oh, he's fucking pushing up against it and struggling. And it's like, well, if I look at this other one, there's a lot more letting go. And like, well, ideas come. They've never not come. Maybe today isn't the day that I need to invent a thing or whatever. And I also have a high tolerance for creating crap. It's like, cool, write me some horrendous content. Easy. This sucks. And then it's like, oh, well, then the channel's open, and then it's like, oh, but actually a better one. And then I write a good one. And it's like, that was so easy because some part of me gave consent to like, you're allowed to not be a genius. You're allowed to not be original. Like, and I like writing for my own release, so that it gives me permission to not be a great writer all the time or whatever. And I think that's just, for me, it's like more about, what's that quote, the goal isn't to make art, the goal is to get in that wonderful state that makes the creation of art inevitable. Maybe you're butchering, but roughly the idea, I'm more interested now in getting into state, and then I'm like, oh, amazing idea, versus like sitting there like yelling at myself, like you suck, it's like not really that fun. But trust, I guess, is my ultimate hack,
Yeah, trusting. And for me, it's a trusting and kind of getting out of my own way to let something that's kind of beyond my personality move through. Around magic, someone as yourself that literally has magic tattooed on his face, that's obviously something that's very, very important and alive to you. And in our worlds, I think there's a relative understanding of what magic is. You talked about sex magic, I think a lot of listeners will understand that. And yet I'm sure some people, when they hear things like occult and esoteric teachings and magic, and, even here in Bali, like when people start talking about black magic, it's like, there's like some pretty gnarly things that go down. So I'd love to hear from your side, like how you navigate like the expression of that magic, not necessarily in a safe way, but in a way in which that's palpable for people to comprehend into their lives. And even magic in of itself is difficult to understand, but there's still some sort of deliverability of it to make it cognitive in some way.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of my like, I don't know if it's my life's journey, but probably the last 4 or 5 years as I've really more leaned into this particular word and this particular framing of what I'm interested in. Obviously, that's necessitated this conversation a lot of times. And for me, I feel like people in my proximity, they're getting a fairly down-to-earth transmission of something, It's different from a distance, or someone sees me online and like, what the hell is this guy doing? And like, some people run towards and some people run away, and some people are just like, I'm not sure, And that's, I guess I'm kind of okay with that as well. Like I don't think I fully knew, but I sort of knew stepping into something that has a lot of shadow and projection and edge and, narratives around it. Like it's quite a taboo thing. We have a lot of religious conditioning still as humans, and, superstition and stuff. And I kind of knew that fully flying the flag for this thing would be interesting. And also comfort myself with like, yeah, but it's interesting. It's not like I'm going to get probably burned alive for it. It's not like 200 years ago. It's more like potential confusion or potential projection, which you work in sexuality, you work with power, you work with many things that have a bit of edge to them. That's just part of the price of entry, I guess, of really owning a certain area is going to be that certain people are triggered by it or have stories about it. For me, I guess it's almost claiming a Western path of initiation and spiritual awakening. Like that's what really magic is. It's like I've spent a lot of time with Eastern philosophy and Tantra, and Tantra particularly is still very core to how I interpret the world. But I feel like magic in the Western esoteric tradition sort of landed as like, oh, this is almost like something that I'm closer to being indigenous to, like you can argue Egypt to Israel to Europe to whatever kind of Israel, but Egypt to Judaism to whatever, but there is as an English born person, there is threads around magic in my DNA that is not in South American shamanism or, Kashmiri Shaivism or whatever, it's like I found something that I felt I had some lineage to. But really for me, magic is about the integration of spirit and matter. It's about bringing the unseen into the seen. It's about, maybe some practical application of invisible spiritual principles into the world around you. And it can be applied at different levels. So the one that people are more familiar with is more like the personal gratification level. I want a new car, put it on my vision board, maybe self-pleasure to it or do a sigil or something that's very like, okay, I've got a new car, amazing. And, I've done this magic and it has worked, but I think where the more magic I've done, the more it is really about aligning intention with my spiritual development, And so I'm using magic for soul initiation, and I'm using magic for essentially connection to cosmos or realizing the self as part of the whole, which, pretty well lines up with Tantra, pretty well lines up with Buddhism, pretty well lines up with esoteric Christianity or Sufism, or, it sort of aligns with most of the mystical cores of pick a tradition, and I think, so for me, yeah, it's about realization of self as the one, that's really the big game of magic. And the difference would be it's a little more of a Western and self-determined path. It's got more room for at least initially the ego and the personal in it, and I think for me also what makes it very interesting is this mixture of like non-dual spirituality, which is not necessarily all magic people are into, but for me the two really overlay, and that makes this sort of some of these concerns about light and dark and whatever of like, oh, that sort of seems not really, I don't really resonate to that sort of superstitious worldview. I'm like, whatever it is that you're afraid of out there, it's already in here on some level, Does that mean I think you should be going around like hexing people or conjuring up this or that? Maybe not, but it's, it's also not worse than stealing from people or punching people in the face or doing other, there's lower and higher actions, whether they're esoteric or not, doesn't really make any difference to me, and it's more about, I guess what I'm trying to say is the more integrated we are, the less shit we are afraid of on the outside. Yeah. I mean, if I'm terrified of it, that's maybe an interesting curiosity to go check it out and see what I'm projecting out there, or what part of me is not cool with that idea, And obviously, I don't need to necessarily put my head in a crocodile's mouth or whatever. But if I notice there's things like, oh, I don't like those people over there, it's like maybe go and be around some of them sometimes and see what that's really about, Because I think it surprises me this is my naive side. When I read like Carl Jung and Aldous Huxley and those kind of people in my like teens and early 20s, I was like, cool. So when everyone reads this, we'll all realize that, the shadow is what's in me. So no one would really ever be afraid of each other or hate each other or need to murder each other or other each other, because we're all going to be aware, that thing about you that I really don't like, it's in me. Okay, I guess I better work on that. And it's like, we just need to get them across this piece of simple information and it's job done. And it's like, didn't really pan out like that somehow. People aren't hungry to realize that somehow. And, that's sad for me.
Yeah, I think remember reading the book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers from Debbie Ford, who's also one of the kind of initial pioneers of shadow work. And, it was just such a eye-opening. I think I found that in my early 20s, and it was just like, wow, okay, like this is why this whole world of spirituality that's trying to chase the light, like what's actually underneath that. And, it's sad to see a lot of people actually still in that energy, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, and I am coming slowly. Like, I can be a bit of a judgmental bastard and a bit of a gatekeeper and whatever, but also I'm gradually trying to come into like, everyone's in the stage they need to be in, as far as I can tell, and some of the things I want to criticize, it's like, yeah, 5 years ago that was you. What are you talking about? Like, it's like, fine, okay, like.
So I'd love to actually dive into that more because I've had this my own experience with like my family who basically thinks I'm don't really understand what I do, have a light generalized idolization. They understand that I make enough money to build nice houses in Bali and I'm taking care of myself, but what I really do, I don't think they really get it. And I remember when I first was on this path, it was like trying to convince them and all this. And then actually, I find actually some of the most simple, enjoyable times is spending with them when I don't need to be anything. I mean, not that I ever need to be anything, but there's actually just a simplicity when of not seeking sometimes, and sometimes this seeking journey that people are always on. Like it's beautiful to always be learning and growing. And when I look around at the people of Bali, like the farmers that are surrounding my home here, like actually just quite simple beings that are connected to the earth and connected to nature, connected to their own level of magic. And I guess I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on like how we in this kind of Western seeking mind of looking for magic, looking for understanding, looking for all of this, like the pros and cons of that, and how you might relate to some of that.
Yeah, that's broad, I mean, what I can say is, I think there are definitely various pronounced stages that I've seen and tracked and have gone through, and I'm sure there'll be, I'm sure I could be on here in 5 years going, oh, Dane in 2025 didn't know what he was talking about, yeah, or I agree with him, but he was missing some nuance that I now, as a 50 whatever year old, could color in a bit more, and that's fine. And I mean, I think there is something in this mind kind of spell, this first spell of, you're born imperfect, you're born in original sin, it's out there. However this frame comes into us, that it's like, okay, kid, you're a loser, but maybe if you get somewhere, you'll be worth something someday. It's like this. There's so many layers. There's capitalism. There's kind of Christianity. There's patriarchy. There's whatever labels at whatever stage you want to put in. We kind of land in these frameworks that definitely convince us. Even the romantic model, right? Like it's out there. Once you meet her, once you meet that one, you'll be complete. You'll be happy. It's going to be all
All gonna
good.
be good.
Right. And it's like, any version of that is clearly destined for failure. I mean, clearly not everyone knows this yet. Like, it's like, when you get 7 figures, bro, that's when it's going to get good, like. And it's like,
It's all gonna be okay.
there's so many of those that I've popped, and they seem so clear. And then I'm still have ones that I'm breaking. Like this year, I rebuilt my financial plans at a level that is so much lower than what I was doing a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I feel like I have more. How do I have more? And it's like, well, you're different. You sit in yourself differently. You have different stuff in community, your art, your whatever. And it's like, that's very interesting because, I'm setting number goals that a 3-4 years ago version of me would laugh at and be like, bro, like, have you lost your confidence? I'm like, I'm actually more confident. I'm more certain, but I'm building exactly what I need to be in alignment with who I am right now, and it's like the right amount is not the most, the right amount is the right amount. And I think basically what I'm getting at is I think there's a maturity that comes from being in the search and being disappointed is actually the magic of the search, Like it's not that you seek and then you find I got it. It's like maybe, hopefully, you get your heart broken. That would be the best case scenario, oh my God, I got my heart broken and that sucked. But then something deeper in me woke up and that was rich, And now, well, I don't love heartbreak, but I'm okay with the possibility that I could get my heart broken again. And it's part of me, it's like, good, I hope you do, And it's like, and it's the same of like, I had to make the money to clock like, okay, so different numbers, same fundamental identity problems and worth issues, just projected on a different thing. And so I think there is spiral guy, there is an inevitability that there is something that consciousness wants us to go through. And I don't think once you've gotten onboarded on that journey, you can necessarily skip it, And so, the way I look at it, it's a bit cartoony, but it's like, consciousness incarnates itself into matter so that it can differentiate from itself, so it can rediscover itself. And it's like, okay, whether I'm a Balinese farmer or whether I'm working in the fucking factory or whether I'm a corporate guy or whether I'm a hippie tantra workshop dude, on some level, I'm playing my part in supporting that oneness thing to experience itself in just the right way so that it can continue to unfold. And from that level, I don't really think you can fuck it up. I think it's doing its thing. But then on the soul level, I do feel like you can kind of be more or less on track or off track. I do seem to experience that sense of like, oh, I'm really aligned right now. This is fucking, and then like, oh, what's happening? I've wandered off the path, but only from a certain perspective, And then obviously from the personal level, we're trying to gratify these impulses and level up through these levels. And I think, and then if you want to go full Eckhart Tolle non-dual, it's like, well, if you just sat there and be empty, you would be in the perfection. And it's like, great, that's cool too, So like, I don't know which is better, but it's all going on, right? Like
it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. As both of us definitely in this world of temple arts, and both, teaching within an organization that deals with the temple arts. And I know that's something that's you're passionate about. And, I get asked the question of what is the temple arts and how does that, what is ritual and how does this apply? And how, I'd say for one, like, how do you apply temple arts and ritual into like day-to-day life in the level of like your own individual leadership for yourself? And how does that apply and work with the greater community in the whole?
Oh, that's such a sexy question for me because it's very on the pulse of where I'm at, like I feel like I've done a lot of self-initiation and whatnot, and that continues, but my current journey is working a lot with groups. And I mean, I've done plenty of teaching groups and all that kind of thing, but I'll still be doing that. But what I'm working with more and more is creating groups and listening to the emergent field of intelligence through the group, and particularly pulling in people who I've got shared resonances with. Like I've got 2 guys here right now that both did hide and temple training at different times to me, and they've moved into my house. We're doing a 1-month temple immersion experiment, which I'll just paint how that looks. We created a container from new moon to new moon, so we're using a lot of basic planetary magic, astrological alignment, and we sort of sat with what are we aligned around, and why would you guys want to help me? Like essentially on the mundane level, help me paint my house and tidy up this house that I bought. Like that's what's happening on the practical. But what we're doing on the deeper is we are all feel very aligned around this culture of temple landing and landing, I guess, the soul of the planet. There's this sense that humanity is awakening and accelerating in its awakening, and we can take a hand in that acceleration. And we're all doing that in different ways, whether it's Tantra or the mystery schools or whatever. And so for me, the practicals look like we're living our week with a planetary magic correlation. So Monday is Moon Day, Tuesday is Mars Day, Wednesday is Consciousness Day, and which is Mercury. And so the themes of the activities, we sit and have a little pod sharing, but each day is flavored a little different, right? If it's Mars Day, it's like, have you got any shit with me? Do you want to bring some, anything that's stuck, any conflict is welcome today. Mercury is more consciousness, so we're actually going to have a meditation and less of a blah, blah, blah. And, Jupiter is Heart Day, so it's like, cool, what's going on deep inside of us? It's not about what shit have you got. It's like, is there anything you want to share that's deep in your heart, And so these simple little things, what they're starting to do is really flavor the frequencies of the day. We're kind of into our third week now, and it's like, and then we'll cook lunch together, and then we're like painting a room or removing a bunch of trash from my house, and in the evening we'll host a temple. And it's like something's happening that is like, because we're going through all these different sort of frequencies that are aligned to bigger cosmic things, but those are just a reference. We get to the end of the week, it's like, oh my God, so much happened. We did like emotional clearing. We did erotic body work. We did a music jam. We painted 2 rooms in the house. We each worked on our businesses separately. And it's like, what I'm interested in is taking, we're in deep containers and stuff often, and that's really cool, but that could be hard to blend into like life. And so because this is a house, it's only half an hour from the Gold Coast, we're around normal society. We're not on a remote island. We're not in, wherever. We're kind of in not far from normie land. We have to drive down to the hardware store to get things. We went to jiu-jitsu together on Monday, which is hilarious because we're like the temple boys go to do some wrestling and then come home. And it's like, there's this joy in mixing these things together, because that's always been one of my concerns. Like, I go into some deep container and it's amazing and it's magical, and then everyone goes back to their homes, and many of them are sucked back into like, I don't know, corporate reality or a family that isn't really attuned to this stuff. And it's like, how do you maintain this magic? And for me, that's, I bought a house and I'm dedicating it to that exact thing. And it's like, it's weird because I live in a container, but it's a porous container. It's not as deep as being in a retreat 24/7. It's like that at a half setting 365, and it's like, this is fucking weird. And it's kind of cool. And we did a bunch of body work on each other, and then we got ideas for our business and did our Instagram fucking things. And it's like, this is really kooky. And so for me, ritual, to answer the question properly, ritual forms multiple purposes. One will be transformation, one will be healing, but a bigger one is bringing groups together, bringing community together, and marking time and marking, the passage of seasons, whether they be literal earthly seasons or astronomical seasons. And I think this is the next step, at least in my vision of building more permanent community, which is like, we come together on solstice. On a Monday, this thing is happening. On a Wednesday, this thing happened. On a full moon, I run my self-pleasure rituals every full moon. I do more like dark meditation every new moon. And I'm just starting to anchor a world around me that is really, for me, it's anchored to something bigger. And it's anchored to more of a sacred culture than what I was brought up in, which obviously churches and stuff offer a version of that. But for many of us, like, that's not the version I resonate with, In fact, that's almost the version, I have an aversion to that. So, but I realize that has provided a deep function for society. And so how do we, it's like Tantra people, it's all well and good, and we're eye gazing and cuddling, but none of them are going to help you move house when you need it. It's like, that's the kind of like, whereas if you're part of the church, those guys will come over and help you out with the practicals, because that's a little more grounded in the matter. And I think that's the next stage for me, is how do I anchor, especially I've moved to a place that for me isn't that particularly, the Gold Coast is not known for its occult embodied tantric whatever. That's not really the vibe. But I'm kind of putting my little flag in the ground and, wanting to anchor more of that. And yeah, ritual with the practical is really where I find myself really happy.
Yeah, I love that, and I appreciate the place in which you're creating there, as well as the the integration into society. One of the retreats I was just teaching was living tantra, and it's all about like how do we actually live and breathe this into day to day life. And yeah, I'd love to divert a little bit into how you can live and breathe that like into relationship, and how that looks like maybe as a new lover in your life, and you want to introduce this, you know, weird sex magic ritual, whatever it may be, or maybe she's not, familiar with that. And yeah, some of your experience in that, with really introducing people to the realms of ritual and magic, and how much they're open towards it, as well as like the challenges of being, this kind of dark wizard magic guy, and how that relates to day to day, like having relationships with women and along those lines.
I mean, if you were to check my like life and message history for the last 4 or 5 years, there's a fairly solid flavor of witchy women and priestessy women and tantric women and astrology witches, and I think there's this, at this point of my life, there's a fairly good self-qualifying sort of force field around my world that is like, you're probably not, I'm hosting self-pleasure rituals every full moon, right, in a new place, which is very interesting. 70% of the people that come have done this kind of thing before, and there's always a couple who are like, I always do it. Anyone first time doing it? There's usually one or two. I'm like, okay, so let me just frame, because obviously they're at an adventurousness level that's enough that they've somehow got onto the WhatsApp thread, or I've invited them, or someone is a friend has invited them. So they're not that far removed. It's not been like Dorothy from the bank has arrived in the room and she's wondering what the hell has just happened. It's people who are looking for something like this, even if they don't quite know what it is. So I feel like I've been very, this kind of blanket of potentially scary vibes, which, I'm often criticized for or challenged for, provides a very helpful filtering system in my world, of like, people are not, okay, can I come to your self-pleasure church ritual and it's even like where I live, it's at the top of the mountain, and the last part, the road goes like this, right? And it's just a bit of a fucking, it's Mystery Road, literally my street is called Mystery Road. And it's like, look, the last bit, you kind of got to, and even my driveway is a bitch, right? It's just like this almost fucking vertical bit you've got to go on. And it's almost like, if you want to go to the wizard's house, you kind of have to mean it. I'm not really at high risk of, hi, I just wandered in here. Oh, we're doing what now? So that's the first layer, is there's a sort of a branding, messaging, and energetic, I don't know if it's a force field, but there's definitely a flavor, you would agree, that I've chose to inhabit. And that seems to, um, you know, it's like if I go in certain rooms that are really light spirituality, I can be like, no, none of the women in here seem like they like me. It's like they're going to the other side, It's like, or if I'm in America, it's like only the old people talk to me. Like, Dane, what do you think happens after we die? I'm like, okay, there's no like, And then if I'm in more of a witchy, esoteric vibe, I seem to be quite a compelling figure. And it's just like, okay, it depends what room I'm in. This is either a repellent or an attractant. It's very pronounced. So that's the thing. Another level is with containers. I really, I have sort of formed in my worldview kind of a like beginner, intermediate, and kind of more veteran sort of spaces that I would hold or
Mhm.
be part of. And that sort of just gives a little bit of framing for me of like, you're not wandering, when no one's at risk of wandering into like a full-blown sex magic ritual at my house. That's going to be 8 people I've known for 5 years that we've done a lot of stuff together. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's other tantra teachers and people who we are comfortable to create that sort of a space together. It's not like I've sold some random ticket and you found yourself in some terrifying ordeal. That's just like, and I think that's what I see sometimes out there. I'm like, really? You're just putting that out on the, anyone can just buy a ticket, huh? That's crazy. Like, it's like, you know, I don't, because I'm kind of an intense energy, but I'm also quite sensitive. So the last thing I would want is someone in my room that doesn't want to be there, not only for their benefit, but I feel weird. It's like, well, so then I do really enjoy creating sort of safe containers, which is, yes, Dark Wizard, but also like Cancerian, enjoy the nervous system ease. Let's do things slower than they happen at some workshops. Like that's also one of my things. And so I really like even the self-pleasure ritual that I run, which sounds wild. It's a slow drop in. There's a lot of framing of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then you're not doing it to get anywhere, and no one's getting in each other's space. And it's can be you holding yourself the whole journey. And I'm going to play music and guide, and you do what feels right for you. And it can go with a bit of intensity, but it's been framed very gently. And so far that seems to work really well. I've run it at festivals and stuff, and it's like, oh, we're getting people relaxed. There's a lot of what I think needs to happen for magic to happen, and for deeper sexuality things. I think having easeful nervous systems in a room and people who are resourced to, be in charge of that is really important. And so that's on the group thing. And on the personal thing, I do find myself, I'm hanging out with someone, maybe it's a date, maybe it's a new friend, maybe it's a whatever. I will often just offer, hey, do you want to do something like this? And it's usually not going to be, let's stick giant crystals in our butt. It's usually like, let's do a little meditation where we've connect to the moon and connect to the black hole and connect to the earth and connect to the sun. And it's like, no one is like, oh my God, that's terrifying, because it's pretty light, and I'm finding that because I have a long-term view to kind of propagate magical culture, it's like, okay, I actually, I'm starting to not necessarily censor, but I want to actually build some stuff that is more resourceful and more educating and more easeful than like, ooh, the Dark Wizard. I feel like I needed to own that early on. And now more it's like, okay, what is this guy on about? What are we talking about magic? What are we talking about? What would be the benefit of anchoring ourselves to the planets and the black hole and the earth and the sun, as, it's a way to be more holistically connected to things. It's like just trying to bring things into grounded reality. And I think that's, you don't want to demystify the mystery completely, but it is totally, to me, desirable to build a gradual awareness of what all this stuff is about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can appreciate that. I was, for a long time, I'm not doing it this year, but often I was holding these kind of introductory temple nights in Ubud, and it were like people rocking in, and it's a very safe container and very safe space. You weren't doing anything with genitals, and it's Bali as well. And they're already edgy about that stuff, anyways. So, but certainly there were some people that came in. You could feel like just the fact they were like going into something called the temple, like the things that they had in their mind about it. It's like, there's such a misunderstood concept. And then at the end, after being like held in a frame of safety, they can have a deeper sense rather than just being kind of, scared by, let's say, an advanced, ritual that's way beyond what they're ready for.
I think so much of it, of the going down the path, is like dialoguing with our own fear, and I like probably about 7 years ago, I went to I was part of a all male temple, and I was like, I don't know about this. And like the invitation was, primarily straight men, by the way, and it's like, the invitation is, okay, so what we're going to do is follow the current of anything that awakens within us, and we're going to honor that current. That's the invitation here. Who is up for that? And I was like, nope, definitely not. Nope. It was like, I hadn't really got to the transpersonal level of like, I'm ready to work with men as part of my tantric journey yet. That kind of opened shortly afterwards. And what was happening was, for me, my vision was like, I'm going to have like cocks in my face. It's going to be just this, this just unhinged, uncalibrated, horrendous experience. I'm so terrified of that. That is not for me. And so I was allowed to sit out and be on my own mattress with myself. And pretty much everyone else was in. And what unfolded was a temple with music playing. And it basically was light touch. And a couple people even kissed. And like, I don't think there was even an erection in the room. It was nude, but it was just like, it was almost, let's see what happens if this many male bodies get together and we open temple. What happens? And it blew my mind because I was there confronted with like where my fear would go to was like 100 out of 10, you know? And it's just like, I just can't handle, and what's going to happen if this happens to me? And it was like, oh, that's what happens when people come to my house for a whatever ritual. They don't even know what I mean by a ritual, you know? And it's like, oh, we're going to like give gratitude, and then we're going to drink some like cacao or blue lotus, and then we're going to maybe, it's like, in a way, it's really quite tame, but there's, you know, the lighting is moody and some of my songs are a bit spooky. And it's like, that's the flavor. But actually, that was like gratitude giving and community connection and eye gazing and maybe some touching. And it's like, oh, I thought, what do you think I was going to sacrifice a goat? You know, like that's not really, but because we're full of fears, you know, and we're full of narratives and whatever, you know, when you name temple, that links to sexuality. I've got a lot of stories about what that could be. You name magic. Well, I've heard about those. You know, I got a pentagram on my neck. The most time people have seen one is in a horror movie, you know? And I'm like, look, it's mostly used by witchy Wiccan ladies who are probably into like, you know, putting leaves in jars and like, you know, like they're connected with nature as their little witchy religion. It's pretty innocent. But if all you ever saw was like some, you know, murder movie with blood and whatever, it's like, what? You think that's what we do? That's like, that's crazy, you know?
It reminds me just, as I'm sure you can appreciate, being a male body in this world, teaching you around sexuality and emotions and talking about all these things that are often so, hidden in our general society. I'm not covered with any tattoos. I think I keep a pretty good, you know, clean cut for the most part. Hair is cut now, so maybe it's not as much of a wild hunter dude. But like, still, the level of projections that come on, even from out without people even knowing I've said a word, and they already have a thought, an idea, and a belief on who they think I am, and I'm sure the same happens for you as well.
Yeah, it's a strong one. And I think there's a road to be walked that is like, on one level, I, with good reason, you know, like when we look at the levels of abuse of power and etc., it's fucking horrendous, and there's just almost an infinite supply of that in our history and in our present. So it's like, okay, kind of fair enough. And as the individual walking that path, you know, that's inspired me to, one, keep things in what to me feels like a reasonable degree of, you know, fairly high integrity. But I've also kind of deconstructed a lot of taboos and whatever. So what for me is in integrity, and I feel is in connection of the people around me and care and synergy. If you take it 3 or 4 degrees out, it still can sound. If you hear something secondhand, it's like, oh my god, like how, you know, they did what or with who, you know, and it's like, it's, you know, what are you going to do? Like I can't do the shadow work in all the brains of all the people who would be, on the one hand, horrified of my life, but on the other hand, secretly probably would like to have those experiences, but they're so wrapped in fear and guilt and shame that it's the only way that, you know, someone could be sexually free or dating a bunch of people, or people are getting naked in some sort of ritual. It must be people up to no good. It must be an abuse of power. And it's like, look around. This is all my friends that we've known each other for years, and everyone here looks pretty happy right now. Like, and they're pretty happy a month later. And it's like, and we know the world we're in, the industry we're in, is fraught with fucked up shit and carnage and trauma. And so I get it. And I do sort of try to balance, like, one, being true to my own current and my own knowing and trust, and two, creating environments that are, you know, safe is a tricky word, but that are at least discerning and created with a degree of awareness and transparency of what it is we're doing and who should be in that space. And it's a dance, but it's one that I think I feel is worth it, you know, even though it's like, I don't think people who aren't in this role know that sometimes it's a bit of a tightrope, you know?
Hmm. For sure, for sure. So last question before we close. I'd love to hear in simple language, best you can, the difference in your mind between magic and shamanism, and where they differentiate.
I mean, the first part is there is a link, and I would say that pretty much everything originates in shamanism. So if we trace anything back far enough, you end up in shamanism. So I would say that for me, shamanism is the primary emergence that precedes magic and religion and contains elements of both. And obviously, a lot of people associate to South America, but to me, that is all traditions' roots are shamanic. So whether we're talking, Neolithic, like Anglo-Saxon, or whether we're talking Indian, whether we're talking Russia, whatever, all those roots are shamanic. So to me, the focuses on that are more around nature connection, maybe working with spirits, traversing different realms, maybe soul retrieval and healing, that kind of stuff. Magic emerges from that, So there's definitely an overlap. When I talk magic with a K, I'm specifically referring to like ritual magic, ceremonial magic, which has a lot more of a Western esoteric consciousness framework overlaid into it. So it's definitely got more of ideas from Egypt, from Judaism, and from often a medieval European synthesis of systems and symbols and structures and working with names of God and maybe invoking angels and all that stuff. So to me, magic is, maybe has some more elaborate consciousness frameworks. It maybe has more personality and egoic layers. Like if we're talking the magic that I'm talking, then it's emerged much more recently in history. But I would say that to be a good magician, there's a degree of shamanic development needed, which will be returned to like the primal elements of nature and earth connection. But it's for me, like the magic that I'm trying to practice is integral, so it would borrow from all levels. So there would be shamanic stuff in there. There would be non-dual spirituality in there. That's not what everyone means when they say magic. If we want to blow magic up to the broadest possible definition, I guess it means everything that is dealing with the unseen and invisible forces and energies and stuff, which shamanism, now they're really more in the same field, So we're talking just magic as a very general word. I think shamanism and magic are playing in the same realms because we're dealing with spirit realms, energy realms, unseen realms that become seen, etc. But for me, ritual magic has a very specific focus around integrating with kind of God, if you like. That will be the Western esoteric. The end game is I am realizing myself as God pulled into a human form so that I can be, realized fully. And that's a specific branch of magic, which we're talking Golden Dawn, Crowley, those kind of traditions,
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. Before we close, any upcoming projects, things that you're creating that you'd love to share, things that you're super inspired about right now that's alive in your field?
Yeah, I have a mentorship called Permission, which is more like purpose and business mentoring for spiritual entrepreneurs. That's a ongoing thing, so people come and go. It just stays open. You can join for a month or many months. So there's still one place in that, and there's a wait list after that. And then I'm building the School of Magic, which is much more about pretty much all the things we're talking about. So integrating ritual in everyday life. We run a monthly live and online sex magic ritual that everyone can dial in and participate in from the comfort of their own home. And we teach kind of ritual practices, occult, esoteric frameworks and stuff like that. That's only $100 a month. And that's really a vision to sort of propagating this culture more globally is what I'm working on there. And I've got a few ISTAs if people want to end up in that space with me. I've got a level 1 and a level 2 coming up that if you want to suss that out, maybe go on the ISTA website and find me. I've got one in Bali in April, a level 2, which feels exciting. And I'm on Instagram talking about all this crazy stuff often. So if you more just want to hear what I'm talking about, I will share this podcast and other things like this from there. And if you want to just be, and I put out music. So I have a single called Magic is Real that is on Spotify right now, which is predictably all about magic.
Amazing, brother. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, unique framework of reality, and you're creating your own reality. And it's always a joy, to connect online or in person. And I really appreciate your perspectives you bring, and how grounded you are in this work as well. There's a lot of gratitude.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in, and please like or subscribe to what's happening here. If you want to see more episodes, check them all out with other amazing characters and amazing beings like Dane. See you next time.